guys, welcome back to another video on my channel. Now let's get into Flash Season 7, the final episode 3, entitled Mother. Now, open up this episode where we have Cisco and everybody else waking up from what happens in last week's episode. Basically, leaving off with the rest of this episode, we basically have the team realizing that Eva is getting more powerful, which they decide to shut down Star Labs. All the windows and all the lights are basically shut off. Everything is cut off. No reflective surfaces anymore. We also seen a Barry, he actually pulled in the Mirrorverse, Eva, and they basically have a conversation of what's right and what's wrong. And then Eva kind of lets him go, which I don't know why she would done that. What did she keep it? I don't know. I mean, it was weird. I mean, this whole episode, it wasn't bad. This episode, we had to move the plot forward, so what could we do to move the plot forward much faster? I mean, anyway, it just wasn't a bad episode. It was just very convenient episode. That was basically this whole episode. Now, we basically get this whole scene of which Barry and the team is now, well, before that, we basically get this scene of Harrison Wells comes back, the original Harrison Wells, the OG Harrison Wells comes back, saying, hey, I can help you with this. That is where Wells would have done, and we basically get this explanation from the original Harrison Wells that, hey, Ash, when he took all the particles of himself and the other Wells, and basically he has, the original Harrison Wells has all the memory of all the Harrison Wells. I mean, which is clear, because did he die? He did die before all the other Harrison Wells, I guess you could argue, what was all that about. But anyway, so basically this moment where, not this moment, but this kind of explanation where Barry and the team is kind of saying, hey, I know how to get my speed back, from last week's episode because he didn't have speed. So he's basically saying now, hey, basically use Iris as this organic source instead of using an artificial one. Now, this was only using Iris as a plot convenience. This wasn't to push Iris' story or character longer. This was using her as a plot device, which has kind of been the habit of them doing, in previous seasons. But I guess, I can understand because Eric Wallace, he kind of wanted to push the story forward. There's more plot conveniences throughout this episode, so I'm going to talk about now. Now, we basically get this kind of unnecessary scene of Joe and Cecile basically in the police station of where Eva, one of her mirror clones, is kind of taking over and kind of hunting them down. It was an unnecessary scene, but I mean, it's a scene that we really didn't need. But I mean, it's whatever. So basically, after that, we basically get this another plot convenience of where talking about, hey, we can use Iris as, this organic speed, the organic speed, this organic source that we need to basically give Barry his speed back. And, this is where Iris steps in, out of the shadows, I would more or less say. This was plot convenience. This whole episode was basically plot convenience. We moved the story forward, which I talked about, a couple minutes ago in this video, but I mean, I guess. So Iris basically puts her hands on this kind of organic source. And basically, Barry gets his speed back and everything, which is fine. Basically we have this little scene of Harrison Wells looking. He looks to be looking at someone and nodding his head, which was kind of a quick little scene, which I don't know what that was about, but I guess, I mean, we talk about Harrison Wells, later on in the video, but we basically have this whole fight scene, this final battle of sorts, of Flash basically facing off with Eva and her whole army, and we basically get this scene of Barry, he kind of uses his lightning as an Iron Man type of sorts, where he uses lightning to basically destroy all of Eva clones. We basically get that fight scene. We basically get Iris, talking down Eva, and basically having to deal with all this. Basically having, hey, basically she gives Eva this whole love speech, and then I guess Eva turns good all of a sudden and decides to basically call off her clones. And it's too strong for her. So I guess in this kind of mushy scene, we get both Barry and Iris holding Eva's hand, and basically the power of love, I guess, basically stops all of Eva clones, and the day is saved, I guess. So we're basically back in Star Labs, which Ralph and Sue Dibney is back in this episode. Ralph and Sue Dibney is back in this episode, which I'm going to talk about after this video, because I have some problems with this video. I have problems with this episode, which I'm going to talk about. When after basically what I'm basically going to talk about all the problems that I have with this episode. Coming in a couple minutes. So basically, we get this scene of which Ralph and Sue Dibney is basically going off and dealing with all the other organizations now that Black Hole is defeated and whatnot. Then basically we get this post-credit scene of which, we get flashback of which Iris is, helping Barry get his speed back and whatever. So we basically have, this scene in which, we look up and we see that all this kind of Speed Force energy colors are kind of split apart. And basically it's red, blue, yellow, green, which we're going to get into next week's episode because we basically have the Steel Force. We're going to get into next week's episode because we basically have the Steel Force, the Speed Force, and some other force that I have to look that up, for all the forces. But we basically get all these forces in all these different colors. And, basically we're going to dive deep into that, into next week's episode. I guess the episodes, following. But, this was kind of the weakest part, the weakest episode of The Flash. Well, The Flash in general. This is basically the weakest episode. I'm just glad that, we done with this whole Eva McCulloch arc. And we can finally get in to season 7 now. Alright guys, that was my review for season 7 of The Flash, episode 3. Comment down below. Like this video. If you hate this video, give a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.